Hello, this is Eddie Mendoza and welcome to Pathways of Hope. Today, March 19, the church celebrates the feast day of Saint Joseph of Nazareth, the adoptive father of Jesus and the husband of the Blessed Mary herself. The passages in today's gospel highlight the qualities of the character of Joseph. He was a man sensitive to the voice of God who spoke in his dreams. Joseph the dreamer nga. And totally obedient to the instructions of God, even in the face of scandal, of danger, and of hardship. He was truly an effective protector of his family. Other than what we read in today's gospel, though, there is very little that we can know about Joseph. This is frustrating for me, because now that I think about Joseph and how he might have raised Jesus, I have so many questions about that. Yes, we know that Joseph taught Jesus to be a carpenter by craft. And yes, we can assume that in accordance with Jewish law and tradition, Joseph taught Jesus the scriptures, everything. But other than that assumption, I have so many questions about what kind of father Joseph was to Jesus, and how much of what Jesus was as a person, as a man, as a teacher, as a man who attracted disciples and followers, how much of that was actually learned from and shared by his father Joseph. We all know the character of Jesus, right? I mean, his wisdom, his obedience to God the Father, his compassion for the poor and lowly, his excellent teaching skills, his knowledge of Scripture, especially all those references in Scripture to what would happen to him as the Messiah. I ask myself, where did Jesus get all that wisdom that he shared in his teachings and his parables? Did he automatically come to know this because he was the Son of God? Or did he learn to become like this? Did his parents, Mary and Joseph, and especially Joseph, did they influence what Jesus knew, what Jesus became, and how Jesus behaved? In Luke chapter 2, verse 51, it says, Jesus was obedient to them, referring to his parents. Did Jesus learn obedience from his parents, especially his father Joseph? And is that why he was obedient to God the Father even unto death? Oftentimes, Jesus is described as someone who spoke with authority. Question: was he self-taught, or did someone influence him or mentor him? Was he always this confident about himself, or did someone train him strength of character and confidence? And if so, what was the role of Joseph in all of this? When Jesus would share teachings and speak about how good fathers treat their sons, would Jesus share this without experiencing them himself firsthand from Joseph? Or was Jesus drawing from his own personal experience about how well his father Joseph treated him as a son? I think it would be reasonable to assume that Jesus' personal experience of being raised by his good father Joseph had a significant influence in his concept and his teachings of fatherhood. And Jesus seemed comfortable attending synagogues, wasn't he? And in fact, interpreting scriptures in front of everyone in the synagogues. Again, as a faithful Jew, Joseph brought Jesus up in accordance with Jewish law and tradition. He would have introduced Jesus to the scriptures and brought him to the temple in Jerusalem. Now I wonder, at what point did Jesus learn and know that he was the Messiah? Did he just know it? Or did his parents tell him about it? I suspect that between the two of them, Joseph and Mary, both Joseph and Jesus, on their own, must have gone through scriptures together and highlighted those many, many references about the Messiah and his mission. And together, they must have talked about it at length. Even when Jesus was attending the synagogues and listening to the speakers there, he must have been with his father Joseph, and they must have processed it. When Luke says, Mary stored all these things in her heart, might these not include those matters about her son fulfilling the prophecies about the suffering Messiah, and maybe the early discussions she heard Joseph and Jesus having about these? I'm sorry, my friends, but I don't have the answers to these. And even if I draw on my own experience with my father and my experience with my children as a father, whatever influence I may have had on my children and my father had on me, this is nothing compared to how Joseph had the opportunity to influence what Jesus thought, what Jesus believed, and what Jesus did. You know, today, of course, there are so many external influences affecting our children's wisdom and their character and their knowledge. My father and me, as a father, are only one of many that can influence and shape the character and knowledge and wisdom of our children. There are schools who teach them many things. There are scholars who study and share great knowledge and wisdom with them. And there is mass media and social media filled with celebrities and influencers who invade every aspect of our lives and shape the thoughts and priorities of our children. But in the time of Jesus, his growing and formative years were spent completely under the tutelage of his father, Joseph. There is no mention in the Gospels of Jesus having any mentor, is there? My friends, listen. I therefore conclude, whether you agree with me or not, that Joseph was the principal and major factor that shaped the mind, the character, the heart, and even the faith of Jesus. Joseph. Imagine that. So, if you ask and you wonder what Joseph was and what he was like, the answer is simple. The fruit doesn't fall far from the tree, does it? Like father, like son. Again, this is Eddie Mendoza, and may God bless us all during this happy feast day of Saint Joseph.